Okay, so hello everybody and thank you for joining us today. Today we have got Asim Anwar from Veeam joining us as we talk about Veeam Backup and Replication. So just before the webinar begins, just a few housekeeping rules. During the webinar you will be muted, but you can of course submit any questions that you may have. So these can be submitted through the questions box which you should see on the right hand side of your screen. There will be an opportunity for Asim to answer all of those questions at the end. There will be a Q&A session, so please do feel free at any point throughout the webinar to submit any questions into that box. We will also be recording the webinar, so we can make that available to you, and we will of course send you a copy of the webinar afterwards for you to share with anybody who you may think it's also of interest to. At the end of the webinar there will also be a critique form, so if you could please fill that in, that would be brilliant, and also at that point if you would like a call back, if you've got any further details you'd like to have a further discussion, then you can also make that known on that critique form, and we can obviously then get back in touch with you and we can obviously answer any questions that you may have. So I'm now going to pass over to Asim and he will begin the webinar.
Okay, so good morning guys. Hope you're all well. I think I've just shared my screen, so that should all be working. So thanks Sarah for introducing me. My name is Asim. I'm one of the system engineers here in the UK. What we're going to be doing today is having a little look at Veeam Backup Replication. I'm going to do some slides obviously to talk about technology, and as well as which I'm going to do a live demonstration of some of the technology that we'll talk about as we go through the session, and also taking any questions as Sarah's already said. So we'll go straight into it. Just as Sarah said, there is a question box in your little GoToWebinar app which you can send a question at any point, and obviously I'll do my best to answer them. So in terms of Veeam Backup and Replication, what we're talking about is modern data protection. So modern data protection from our point of view is about using technology that is built for virtualization. It ticks all of the boxes in terms of, you know, doing your backup super fast, restoring your backup super fast without taking up all of your time. And that is what we encompass into this modern data protection theme. So our technology has been built from the ground up to address backup, replication, disaster recovery, data protection in the virtual world. So what we haven't done is taken a legacy backup product and modified it to backup virtual machines. We have created a technology from the ground up which basically plugs straight into VMware and Hyper-V at the API level and backs up as efficiently as possible. And one of the things we've done there is to eliminate backup agents. By eliminating backup agents, we've done some key things to your backup. A, we've improved the performance, because there is no CPU, etc. generated in the virtual machines. There's nothing installed into the virtual machines. We do everything at a lower level. So we snapshot the virtual machine using an API call, and then we pull that backup data block at a time directly from your SAN. And that is why A, we've eliminated backups, and B, why agents are bad. So that's one of the key reasons that we are built for virtualization. We have full support for vSphere 5.1 as well as Service 2012. We have the VMware Ready status for 5.1 already, which is market leading. If you are a Hyper-V customer, then we have full support for Service 2012. We have our own change block tracking implementation for Hyper-V. We can also support clustered shared volumes as well. So what we do is go in at the API level and do image level backups. We do quiesce those virtual machines using the VSS services. So if it's Windows based, then we will quiesce, for example, an Exchange server, a SQL database, domain controller using VSS. And then we will do an image level backup, and we will do it at a block level so that it's super fast. Other things we'll talk about as we go through the deck are replication, which is built into the product as well. We'll talk about the vPower technology and also virtual apps. So let's say we're going to go around this modern data protection theme, and the three key areas we're going to address as we go through are powerful, easy to use, and affordable. And so the first section was going to talk about some of the powerful technologies that we bring to data protection. The first one is called Instant VM Recovery. Instant VM Recovery is about you having a single virtual machine failure, and how do you get that virtual machine back up and running as fast as possible. Now, with a legacy backup product, to restore a virtual machine, the time it's going to take is directly related to how big that virtual machine is, where it's stored, and how much throughput you have on your network. So if you lose a 500 gig mail server, then it's going to take a couple of hours just to process that virtual machine, rebuild its disk file, and get it back up and running. Using Veeam Backup and Instant VM Recovery, we can get any virtual machine back up and running in your production network in approximately 2 minutes, okay, so regardless of disk size. So very, very powerful. The way it works is, instead of running that full restore, what we basically do is to spoof the file restore. So we put in this empty pointer file that represents the fully restored virtual machine, and we tell the hypervisor, whether it's Hyper-V or whether it's ESX server, to say, this is the 500 gig file, it's been restored. What we actually do using our vPower technology is to send the blocks on demand to trick the hypervisor into thinking that virtual machine has been restored. What we do at the same time is, once it's back up and running in this 2-minute period, is to actually start that full restore behind the scenes. So whether it takes 2 hours or 3 hours, you only get 2 minutes of downtime. We run that restore behind the scenes, and once it's finished, we seamlessly flick you back to where you started. The next technology I'm going to talk about is called SureBackup. So most backup products will tell you if a backup has completed. They will tell you if a verify has been completed. What these products won't do is to guarantee the recoverability of those virtual machines. To guarantee the recoverability of a virtual machine, what you would have to do is to allocate some time in your diary and to be able to run a full restore. You would have to have the time, the disk space, the resource available in a segregated environment to be able to run a restore and verify that those virtual machine backups are working. Now, the problem with this is, I'm sure all of you guys out there, you all work in IT, the reality of actually having time available to run a full DR test are very, very unlikely. So what we've done with our SureBackup technology is to make it possible for you to run this detailed level of verification as a fully automated task with no human interaction. So what we do is we use the same vPower technology, which can run a virtual machine directly from a backup file, but we bring those virtual machines up in a segregated environment. Now, this segregated environment, we call it a virtual lab, is essentially they are virtual machines. The only difference is they're connected to a vSwitch, which is behind a tiny little NAT appliance. So again, it's just a virtual appliance, and it doesn't take a huge amount of configuration. But what it means is that we can boot up these VMs from the backup files we're creating in a bubble, okay, and then we can do some very detailed testing on them. The first thing we do is to make sure the virtual machine boots, okay, and that the VMware tools or the Hyper-V tools start, so we know the virtual machine will boot. We'll make sure it connects to the network stack, so we know all the networking is working. We will then test some of your key applications. So we will test Active Directory, we will test DNS, we will test Exchange, we will test SQL, we will test IIS. Over and above that, you can run any script you want on these virtual machines. At the end of this SureBackup process, we will tear down the lab and send you an email guaranteeing the recoverability. Okay. The key thing here is as unlike the instant restore, we never run that full restore. So what it means is we never take a sideways copy of your data. We just run the virtual machine directly from the backup file, fully boot it, test it down to that app level, and then tear it down and guarantee recoverability, which is hugely more effective effective than running a file level verify. File level verify is not telling you anything about the virtual machine, the apps, the networking, etc. So that's SureBackup. One of the other things we can do with this technology is to allow you to do some advanced level, application level restoring. Now, I'm going to talk about other technologies as we go through around Exchange Restore. We have some new technology around SharePoint Restore as well. 2 seconds, we've got a question here around SureBackup. So I've had a quick question from one of the guys around the bubble. So in the bubble, it will need any prerequisites that the server requires. So for example, if you want to test an Exchange server, then you would need a domain controller because Exchange services won't start without a domain controller. If you just wanted to test a domain controller, obviously, then you won't need anything else. So the answer to the question is yes. If the application needs prerequisites like a domain controller to start, then you will need to fire those up as well. What we do, though, is allow you to reduce the amount of resource. So we can reduce the memory, for example, of that domain controller because it's not a live domain controller actually working in the environment. So we can reduce the resource. We can allow you to allocate specific resource pools that those virtual machines boot in, and we can allow you to schedule the time so it's off-peak. So back to UR, what UR allows us to do is to do some advanced application level restoring from applications that we don't have, for example, Exchange level restore, we can do using our new Exchange Explorer. But let's say, for example, you wanted to restore an Active Directory object. What we would do there is to fire up the virtual lab with the domain controller in it, and then allow you to use a wizard to say, pick out the OU or the Active Directory object and put it back into your live domain controller. And the U in UR stands for universal because we can do this with any virtual machine. So, for example, if you said to us, I'm running Novell, for example, I'm running NetWare and I want to be able to do a restore, we can allow you to do it. If you are running Red Hat and you're running Oracle on it, or you're running any application which I may not even have heard of, then all I have to say is if you can run it in a virtual machine, then we can bring it up in a virtual lab and we can allow you to restore from it. And the main power behind this virtual lab is that what most backup products allow you to do is to mount a backup as a file system. And then, once you've got it as a file system, if it uses a database or uses some sort of proprietary data store, all you see is a large dot whatever file. The problem with that is you then need another technology to allow you to get into it and pull out whatever item you're trying to restore. What we do is to boot up the whole server with all the services running, with all the data stores mounted, and allow you to interact with it like a whole server. And that's the key difference here. The other thing we allow you to do with this technology is to do any kind of testing you want. So let's say, for example, you want to patch your Exchange server, you want to patch a database server, you want to patch an app server, bring it up in the virtual lab, run the test on a backup first, which is, again, completely read-only. It's non-destructive before you run the live server. You may have some in-house developers who want to be able to run a test on a database and a web server. You can just fire up it from the last backup point, give them access to it, and allow them to do whatever they want. So another good example here on the slide is training. So you may have some new admins and you want them to be able to have a look at the Exchange management console, but you don't want them to do is take down your mail server. So boot up a virtual lab with a domain controller and an Exchange server, give them full access to it, allow them to have a look around, maybe set them an exercise. I want you to go in and create this user. I want you to set up this mailbox group, etc., and be completely confident that they're not going to be able to break your server. So vPower is the technology that underpins these three technologies we've talked about. So vPower is patented technology created by Veeam software and it's our ability to run a virtual machine directly from a backup file without having to run a full restore. And so just a little table to recap on the 4 technologies we've just talked about. So vPower underpins all of these. We've got instant VM recovery, get any virtual machine back up and running in approximately 2 minutes. SureBackup to properly guarantee the restoration of those virtual machines with no human interaction. Application item level recovery from any application, and the ability to sandbox a set of virtual machines and to run any testing in a non-destructive environment, but using live data. Okay, so a couple of other things that fit into our powerful section. One of the things we offer with our technology, as well as backup, is the ability to run replication. Okay, so backup, we use the term data protection. Replication is more around disaster recovery. So disaster recovery is more about, I've lost my site, I've lost the whole data center, I need to bring my workloads up somewhere else. With data protection, we're talking about file level restore, application level restore, maybe a virtual machine level restore, maybe one host. With one host, HA is going to protect most of it, instant VM recovery is going to mop up the rest. If you lose your whole site, then that's where replication kicks in. And what we can do with replication is we can replicate your virtual machines to another site, to another host, or another SAN connected to a host. Regardless of the size of your environment, you can run data protection with Veeam. We will replicate each virtual machine, we will throttle the bandwidth usage, we can re-IP the virtual machines, we can fail over, we can fail back. The smallest site you can have with Veeam replication is a standalone ESX host with a load of local disk or a standalone Hyper-V host. From that point on, you can scale it to any size you want. You can add a shared storage array, you can add multiple hosts. That shared storage array completely different vendor to one on your production site. It can be a smaller SAN, it can be a cheaper SAN, it can be the same size SAN. We don't really care because the way we replicate those virtual machines is through the vStorage API. So we don't have to care about the idiosyncrasies of the array. We go into the vStorage API and we address the VMFS volume. This is how we can even replicate to a local VMFS volume. So as I say, the key thing really here is we're giving you some enterprise level functionality, including re-IPing, failover, failback, very, very easily, very, very powerful technology. And in terms of the licensing, if that DR site is passive, i.e. it's only used in a disaster, then you don't actually need to purchase licenses for it. So that is replication. Other bits of technology we have is so file level recovery, very, very fast. You can literally just mount a VM, search for a file, and put it back where it came from. We have, so with VMware, we've been utilizing change block tracking since they first brought it out. We were one of the first companies to utilize it. With Hyper-V, we actually have our own implementation of change block tracking. So for those of you who don't know, change block tracking is about running an incremental backup or a reverse incremental backup. Once you've done that full backup, what most backup products have to do is then scan the disk the next day and scan the backup to calculate what has changed. Change block tracking eliminates all of this scanning because it keeps a real-time table of what blocks have been changed. We just basically make a call into it to say, tell me what blocks have changed on this virtual machine between this date and timestamp and this date and timestamp. It just tells us, and then we create that incremental file up to 20 times faster. Okay, so those are all of our technologies in the powerful section. We'll now move on to easy to use. The technology supports both VMware and Hyper-V. And by that, I don't mean there's a VMware and a Hyper-V edition. We actually support both platforms within the same console. So you could have a whole VMware cluster and a Hyper-V cluster in the same site and manage it all from one Veeam Backup Replication console. Okay, so we are very much hypervisor agnostic. We have a distributed architecture that allows you to have one management server, have as many backup proxies as necessary. a backup proxy is basically just a Windows server, either physical, which is attached to the storage, or a virtual machine without any of the management stuff on it. So it's essentially like a headless backup server or a drone backup server, which is controlled by the management server, and it is told to run a backup job, and it just registers back when it's done. And what this means is that we can scale out to any size of architecture, and we can scale very, very quickly and easily. What we also do with this scale-out architecture is to apply some intelligent load balancing. So as the backup jobs start to run at whatever schedule you've decided, the management server is going to hand out backup jobs based on how many proxies are available, how much CPU those proxies have, how much memory those proxies have, how much I/O is available to those proxies, and also what site they live on. And what you don't have to do is babysit your backups anymore. You just put in this Veeam architecture, you deploy your proxies, you schedule your jobs in one place, and you allow the load balancing algorithm to take over. More easy to use functionality, so the user interface, which we'll see as we go through this WebEx, is very, very simple, easy to use. It's not complex, and it is very intuitive, so you can basically figure out what's going on without having to read a massive manual. The web interface, which I'll show you, allows you to do file restores very, very quickly and easily, and it also allows you to delegate file restores. So we have a couple of different roles there, one of which is called a file restore operator. What that means is you can allocate any Active Directory user to be a file restore operator. You can limit them to specific file extensions, so the most common ones we see out there are doc files, spreadsheets, and PowerPoint files, and say this guy's a file restore operator. He logs into this web page, and he can only restore Word and Excel files, for example. And it's a nice way of offloading that, basic task but common task to a less technical member of staff to free up your sysadmins to do some more complex jobs, maybe with new projects, new applications, however your IT environment is evolving. In terms of the affordable, so in terms of manpower, the key thing here is, in a total cost of ownership exercise, manpower I think is quite important, and with our technology what we really do is reduce the amount of manpower required. So as I say, you don't have to have a massive backup team, you don't have to babysit your backups, and what you'll find is, if you look on the net, if you look on blogs, etc., the main feedback we get is it just works, which is nice for a software company. I've worked with lots of different software in my time, and a lot of the time the marketing and the reality of using that technology don't necessarily tally up. Whereas with Veeam technology, if we say we're going to do it and we say it's going to work and it's going to do such a thing, it will just work, and it will significantly reduce the amount of man hours required to babysit the technology. The software licensing is very simple and easy. It's licensed per CPU socket. You don't have to count your virtual machines, you don't have to count your mailboxes. There's only 2 editions, standard and enterprise, and it's very easy, quick and easy to deploy as well. If you want some pricing information, you can speak to your account manager at Byte Software. They'll be very happy to help you. The Veeam Explorer for Exchange, which I'm going to show you in my demo, is a very, very fast way of restoring item level from an Exchange 2010 mail server. And I'll show you this in the demonstration. One of the other bits of technology we've added in again, which is free, just like the Exchange tool, with no additional purchase, is integration in with some HP storage arrays. So for any of you out there which have a HP Store Virtual, then we have some advanced technology that allows us to mount a HP SAN snapshot directly and run some advanced Veeam technologies directly from it, such as an instant restore, such as an Exchange restore, directly from a HP SAN snapshot. Just a few screen dumps there. And so, the technology is storage agnostic. We have some inbuilt dedupe, we have incrementals, we have reverse incrementals. We will automatically exclude your swap files. If you run some replication and the source is not thin provisioned, we will always thin provision your destination virtual machines. So we've had a question from one of the attendees is, can Veeam backup physical RDMs yet? So the problem with physical RDMs is that there is no way for us to address them because they are outside the virtual environment. So my question back would be that, obviously you made the decision to use physical RDMs. There's a couple of things that have happened since then. There's very little performance gain from using physical RDMs. B, it's very, very easy to change a physical RDM into a virtual RDM. What that virtual RDM does is gives us a VMDK pointer file to allow us to run our snapshot and back it up. But in terms of answering your question directly, physical RDMs, we don't have the ability to back them up, and I do not foresee a way for us to be able to back them up because of the way they are completely outside of the virtual environment, and there's no way for us to be able to make an API call to snapshot them. So back to the slide deck. So just to recap really on your return on investment. So reduce costs, eliminate downtime, we can create those virtual labs, we can help you maximize your server consolidation and keep your job, which means that when you do have that failure, you have the confidence to know that your restore is going to work, and you're not going to be brought up in front of a board of directors to say, why did we lose that mail server for X number of time? Okay, so we've got a question which is, will this be able to migrate VMs from VMware to Hyper-V? Now, it's an interesting question, and the answer is, there are technologies out there that can help you migrate. The key thing that you need to do, in theory, we probably could migrate it, but the difference is that even if we did migrate it, if we migrated a virtual machine from VMware to Hyper-V, the file format is not going to work. So, what you really need to be looking for is a tool that will allow you to convert a VMDK to a VHD. Now, as I say, there are technologies out there. Microsoft have a technology out there which can help you to convert it. Just be aware of it, that it is a one-way conversion. They're not going to help you convert back to VMware. But there are other tools out there. So really what you're looking for is a virtual file format converter tool, which we don't have at the moment, and we could probably implement one quite easily, but it is probably quite a political thing. So what we are doing is we're trying to be very much hypervisor agnostic. So we will support you in whatever technology you want to use. If we make a conversion tool, then obviously we are going to probably annoy one of our vendor partners. So we're probably not going to do that. But there are tools out there that allow you to convert from one file format to another, which will help you with achieving that aim. And that's it for the slides. So, just to recap really where we started, modern data protection, powerful, easy to use, and affordable. And that is what our technology is all about. What I'm going to do now is to run some demonstrations. So this is my small lab, which runs on my laptop. What I have is a virtualized ESX server, and here's my vSphere client. So I'm running a small domain controller, I have an Exchange server, and a replica of that. I also have a server 2012 with the Hyper-V role installed, and I have a server 2012 virtual machine on top of that. I have a vCenter. I also have a Veeam 1 monitoring server. So we're not planning to talk much about Veeam 1 in this session, but if you do have any questions. Okay. So we've got another question, which is, does Veeam connect to standard tape drives attached to proxy servers? So the answer here is that what we're currently talking about is version 6.5 of Veeam Backup. Version 7 of Veeam Backup, which is going to be out in July, is going to support tape drives, which are attached to Veeam servers, as long as there's a Windows-based driver for it. The way the Veeam technology is sold is that as long as you have valid support, you're able to upgrade to the newest version. And also, one of the things that's happening, which is probably more of a commercial thing, is that version 7 is going to have a 10% price increase to version 6.5. So what I would say to you is that even though we don't have tape support today, I have a copy of the beta, which is still an internal beta, otherwise I'll be showing it to you guys. There is tape support in it. Version 7 is going to come out in July with tape support. If that is one of the things you need, I would encourage you to purchase it now and then upgrade. You will basically get tape support for free as opposed to having to pay a 10% increase in price. Okay, so back to my demo rig. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a few different product demonstrations. This is my vManagement console, and the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to run through some different types. We're not going to run a backup job, that would be boring. We're going to run through some different levels of restore. And the first one we're going to do is an instant VM recovery. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to run an instant VM recovery. I've been backing up this Server 2012 VM on this Hyper-V 3 host. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run an instant VM recovery. 2 seconds. Okay, so I don't think any can't stop. Yeah, that's fine, Darren. Yeah, that makes sense. So what we're going to do is run an instant VM recovery of the Server 2012 VM and essentially put it back next to the powered off copy of itself. I'm going to run an instant VM recovery. I'm going to show you the steps, and you can see how quick and easy it is. So one of the things you'll notice is I see VMware and Hyper-V here as options, and that is purely because I've added my ESX server and my Hyper-V server into the console. And that is why I see that option. If I only had one of those technologies, I wouldn't get this list. I would just go straight into whatever platform I'm using. So we select Hyper-V because we're going to do an instant VM recovery on Hyper-V. I select my instant VM recovery. Next, you get to pick the virtual machine. Now I'm going to pick it from the backup. Server 2012 nested, 21 restore points. Okay. Next. Now I get two options here. The top one is in a live scenario. It means the VM is dead, and what would actually happen is it would delete this guy, delete what remains of its VHDX file, and just fully replace it. Now mine's just a demonstration, so I'm going to pick the other option, which allows me to pick a few more things, like give it a different name, etc. I can pick which host it's going to run on. I only have one virtualized host, so I have to pick that. What I get to do here is, if I could click, is to pick where the virtual machine files are going to end up. And in a live environment, what you would see here is a list of LUNs underneath if you had a shared storage array. Now, I have a virtualized ESX Hyper-V server, so I've just made a folder here called Instant Restore. Click Next on that. I get to choose whether it's connected to the vSwitch or not. Now, I have my Server 2012 VM powered off, which means I can connect it to the live vSwitch, and it's not going to conflict. I get to, because I'm putting it next to the live one, I get to give it a different name, and that will also give it a new GUID as well. So we'll call it Bytes, just for Sarah. There we go. And you can see there it's picked the option to create a new GUID itself because it knows there's a different name, and that's it. So to finish on that, and what we'll see are some log entries that will hopefully run through and go with what I talked about in the slides, which is to create this empty disk file there in the folder we allocated, to put the virtual machine into the Hyper-V console's inventory, to send it a power on command. Okay, so that's it for the vPower piece. The instant restore is done. If we go back to the Hyper-V server, what we see is that the server called Bytes has appeared in the inventory, and you'll notice that this has only taken a few seconds, and the time we quote is approximately 2 minutes. And that 2 minutes time, most of that is actually virtual machine boot time. Okay, so most virtual machines on average, based on average hardware, take a couple of minutes to boot, and that's where we get that time from. So the instant restore piece actually only takes a few seconds. What we'll see now is the virtual machine will be running its Server 2012 boot. Once it's finished doing the little swirly thing, it will hit the login prompt. There you go. So it's hit the login prompt there, and that's it. Oh, that's probably just going to take a couple of seconds to synchronize to Pine, so we'll leave that, and I'll just go back and finish off the process. When we come in here, what we see is that the server bytes has appeared here in the list in Instant VM Recovery. When we right-click on it, we get two options. The top one is to migrate to production. And what that migrate to production does is to actually start that full VM rebuild. If I was to run that, what it would do is to take the pre-allocated file I created in my directory and actually start filling it in block at a time. The option I'm going to use in a sec is stop publishing, which is to actually tear that down as if it was a test. Okay. So the next restore I'm going to run is to show you a file restore from the browser interface. So Enterprise Manager is our IIS-based web interface, and what it allows us to do is a few interesting things. If I log in as an admin, I see some reporting interfaces, so I can see what's happened in the last 24 hours, last 7 hours. I can export some reports. I can see all my backup jobs, etc., etc. But the bit I wanted to show you guys was the file level restore, which I talked about in the presentation. What the file level restore allows us to do is to pick a virtual machine and to either instantly browse it and see all the files in it and right-click and run a restore, or to run a search on it. And it can be a wildcard search, and it's just a string-based search into the file system to find files that have that string in them. And one of the other things I mentioned in the slides was this ability to allocate a user as a file restore operator. Okay, now I've done this. I've created my user account called Asim, and he is a file restore operator. And I've also set the settings that limit a file restore operator to specific file extensions, or haven't, but I could do. Okay, and what I'm going to do now I'm just going to log back in as my user account just to show you what that user would see. What we get there is just the file restores tab. I don't see any of the management information. Okay, so a couple of questions. Is that from backup? Yes, I'm instantly just browsing the last backup there. I could pick a restore point if I wanted to pick a specific backup, but that would by default go to the last one. And will file restore support RHEL? So we do file restore from Red Hat, and what we do is when you run it, we run a tiny little Linux appliance, which you don't see, because obviously if we did mount it, you would see like an ext3 volume, which would be unusable. So we have this tiny little helper VM, which fires up, and what it basically does is it mounts the volume and then presents the volume to Windows, so that from the backup server, you are able to browse directly into a Linux volume. Okay, so just a couple of questions there. Oh, another question, I think. Sorry, guys. Does Veeam partner with anyone for backup or physical service? So, in terms of partnering, what we, because obviously, we do partner with Microsoft to an extent. So, if you wanted to use DPM, then we can partner there. But as opposed to partnering, what we do have are some integration guides. Where we can integrate with most backup products. So, for example, Backup Exec, most backup products. But strictly speaking, there wouldn't be a huge level of integration there. What I would say is that if you have some physical servers and you're using a product, then for now I would continue to use it. But generally, what we see people doing is moving more towards a virtual space. So, if you have some physical servers, do you need those physical servers to remain physical forever? If not, are we able to virtualize them? It's more I would be trying to go with that. So in terms of, I'm a backup set. So our backups and replicas use the same services, use the same management console. The key difference between them is that a Veeam backup will create a deduped, compressed backup file. A replica will create a VMDK file for VMware. You probably are VMware if you use SRM. So for VMware, what we'll create is replicas of those VMDK files, and they are whole virtual machines on another site. So the difference being is that you can eliminate two technologies, use one technology to do what those two technologies are trying to do for you, and I would say do it in a much simpler, much more cost-effective, much more efficient manner. And another question here. Yes, we can truncate transaction logs for Exchange 2010. We can also truncate truncate transaction logs for SQL as well. Okay. So in terms of RDM, so we had a whole chat around physical RDMs. The question really here is whether you have physical or virtual RDMs. If you have a physical RDM, then we have no visibility of it. If you have a virtual RDM, then we can still run a snapshot, we can still make a backup of it. So it depends what kind of RDM you're using. Physical, we're never going to see it. Virtual, we can. If you have physicals and you are in a position to create them to virtual, it literally takes a couple of seconds to convert from a physical to virtual RDM. And also, as I said earlier, there's an actually interesting study out at the moment from VMware, some VMware techies, who essentially show that there's very little performance gain now between a VMDK file and an RDM. So in terms of is Veeam replication preferential to storage replication, what I would say is that Veeam replication is very similar in terms of what you get. You still, replication is about, I'm generating this much data, I need to get it down that link to my other site. We are going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to take the least number of blocks, we're going to compress those blocks, we're going to build the replicas on whatever storage you want, we're going to re-IP them, we're going to fail you back, but using the same technology and the same management console. So what that means is, if you get storage replication, it's going to have additional costs and complexity involved. You then need another product to sit on top of it to orchestrate the failover and the failback. What we do for you is to run the replication and all of the orchestration so that you don't have to have another product in there. Just got a quick question around Exchange DAGs. So you can back up any one of the DAGs. Obviously, if they've got the same roles and the same data, you can back up any one. That's correct. So you can back up any member of the DAG if they have the same role. Obviously, if you're running different roles and you want to back them all up, it's completely up to you if you want to back up the same DAG from different points, but really you just need to back up one of them. So the next thing I'm going to show you guys is a Exchange level restore from Exchange 2010. Okay, so I'll show you the steps, very, very quick. I literally run a restore. Now what we're going to do here is essentially mount the Exchange server as an NTFS volume. Okay, and what that is going to do is going to expose the Exchange database to us. Okay, now I don't even run Exchange 2010. I'm actually running an older version. This is an Exchange 2010 backup from one of our Russian colleagues. Okay, and all it does is once we've mounted it, is it exposes the Exchange database file to us. You can see it's 264 meg. Now, most backup products at this point are going to say, well, this is why you need an Exchange agent, right? Because all you've got here is an EDB file. How are you going to use it? Now, with our Veeam Explorer for Exchange, what we have done is to create a few services that are part of the Veeam Backup product, which can make API calls directly into an EDB file. And all you have to do at this point is to literally double-click an EDB file. And the Veeam Explorer for Exchange kicks into action, and it penetrates straight into that EDB file, and we're instantly able to see what is inside that mailbox store. I can see all the users. So as you can see, one of the Russian gentlemen who sent it to us is a bit of a sci-fi nerd, so he's got all different sci-fi characters. But you can see all the different users. I can go into Captain Kirk's mailbox, I can see his mails, and then I can do a number of different things to it. I can save the message, I can forward the message on, I can export it to a PST, or I can drop it straight back into his live mailbox. Okay, so very, very quick and powerful stuff. I can do it at the mail level, I can do it at the user level, I can just basically go in, I can even see any other items. So let's see if he's got any, he doesn't have any calendar entries, but if they did have calendar entries, you get some example, I can even restore those. So that's how fast it is with Veeam Backup to do an item level restore from Exchange. Now, we only have 10 minutes left, so I was going to show you guys the new SharePoint restore, which is basically very similar to this. Okay, what I'm going to do instead is, because I'm running out of time, is to show you guys the new Cloud Edition interface. So Cloud Edition is it's a slightly different license. It's a Cloud Edition license. It gives you everything we've just talked about and some additional functionality. What this Cloud Edition allows you to do is to schedule an automated job that essentially, let's say once a week, picks up some backup files and ships them into some cloud storage. Okay. Now, depending on how much data you've got, it may be suitable, it may not. You know, it really does depend how long it's going to take to put that data there and put it back. If you've got, you know, a reasonably small amount of data, or you are only looking to protect a small amount of data to the cloud, then this is something that may interest you. So I'm going to run a step backup plan wizard just to show you what happens. So next, the first thing I get to do is to choose my cloud provider. Now you can see there's a number of different cloud providers in the list, and the one I'm using, because I don't have a cloud account, is even FileShare, which is just a normal FileShare. The way that cloud providers are on the list is they basically have to have implemented a cloud based on OpenStack. So as long as they can present OpenStack storage, it'll probably work. At the moment, this is the list for the first edition. The list is growing, but you know, your key sort of ones that we're probably going to be wanting there: Amazon, Windows, Azure, they're in the list already. Once you've selected your cloud provider, you get to give it a name, and then you get to go through and set some options. So the key thing, first of all, is to point it at where your Veeam backups are being stored. So if they were on a network share, I can just mount that share. Mine are actually in here, so I can just pick that, or I could pick a specific virtual machine. Let's say I just want to protect my domain controller, pick that folder for now. I then get to do a few different little tweaks, so I can say, okay, I only want to back up .dbk files, for example. So only full Veeam backup files. I specifically don't want to back up another extension. I only want to back up files that were created, modified since a specific date, so I don't want to do any old data. Next, do I want to use compression? Do I want to use encryption? If I want to use encryption, what encryption level is the cloud provider I'm using supporting? So I get to pick that. I get to put in my password, which is part of my cloud account. I get to encrypt the file names. I can then set some options in terms of purging. So let's say I just want to keep 2 weekly backups in the cloud. All I really want is a worst case fallback. You know, I've got local storage, I've got different things going on, I've got some replication, but it'd be nice to know I don't have to use tapes anymore that get sent to Iron Mountain. I can just ship it to the cloud. Okay, you know, that's what the cloud is for. It's just basically some offsite storage which I don't have to manage, I don't have to do any admin to, but I know it's there. And I can say I want to delete files after 30 days, for example. Okay. Next, I can then schedule it, and I can say, you know, I want it to start from a specific date. I want it to happen, you know, daily, weekly, monthly, for example. However often I'm looking to schedule it. Once I've set the scheduling, I am able to run some scripts if I need to, and specifically stop a service or something, and then run it. I can get it to send me an email. I can get it to write to my event log, and that's it. And that is how I create a cloud backup plan. And once I've done that, my cloud backup plan just runs. I install it on my Veeam Backup server, so I don't need another server for it. And it's just a nice, simple, efficient way of getting an offsite backup without having to do anything physical, and to just, set up some cloud storage and just to get it to essentially run an encrypted file copy to my chosen cloud provider. So that is Cloud Edition. I've used up nearly all of my time, so I'm probably going to stop at that point. Unless you guys have any additional questions, I hope I've answered them all accurately and that you're happy with the responses. If you do have additional questions and you specifically want to get through to me, the guys at Bytes are able to do that. I did have my email address up on the slides as well if you copied them down. What I'm going to do now is just so the latest version has the SCP, etc. So I think you're talking about Veeam Fast SCP. So you can still do that kind of file copy. We haven't taken that out, and you can even do that file copy type stuff using VMzip, which is a free tool which essentially replaces Fast SCP. So for you guys out there who've used Veeam Fast SCP, I know I did many years ago before I ever heard of Veeam. I used Fast SCP just to be able to move a VMDK file around manually. There is VMzip now, which essentially does the Fast SCP functionality and a bit more for free. Okay, so I don't know if Sarah is still with us, or whether I've geeked her to death and she's not listening anymore. Are you there, Sarah?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I think I'm probably finished at that point. I don't know if you want to add anything on the end before the guys drop off.
Thank you everybody for coming. Obviously, if you do have any questions that you would like to be answered outside of the webinar, you can of course get in touch with your Bytes account manager. Alternatively, if you don't have Asim's email address, you can email tellmemore@bytes.co.uk, and we can obviously make sure that they are passed on and that all your questions are answered.